let's move on and talk about Derek Shelton's emerging staff. So we'll start with a quick summary, Jeremy, and then I want to dig into a couple of specific names that I think are interesting. So we'll do outs, ins, and then unsures. So out, Jace Tingler, former bench coach, has been hired, as was heavily rumored and suspected, as Tony Vitello's bench coach in San Francisco. They were college teammates together at Missouri. Tommy Watkins out. He has been hired by the Braves as their third base coach. Kobe Suggs, former bullpen coach, hired by the Texas Rangers in the same role. Hank Conger out, and Nate DeMann, who was the quality control coach, also out. No word on where they may end up yet. In or retained, Pete Mackey and assistant pitching coach Luis Ramirez. Ramon Borrego also being retained, and then two brand new hires, which we'll get to in a minute. The names that are unsure, all of the hitting coaches. So assistant hitting coaches, Trevor Amicone and Raiden Sierra, and then Matt Borg-Schulte. All three of those guys were hired last year. I do believe all three of them have at least one more year left on their current deals. The two new hires, Jeremy, that I want your take on. LaTroy Hawkins, hired as the brand new bullpen coach for the Minnesota Twins. Why don't we start there? I feel like this has been universally lauded as like a piece of good news everyone can coalesce around, but your thoughts on LaTroy Hawkins as Derek Shelton's first hire?
Yeah, I think the thing about Hawkins, the thing about a lot of guys that go in this direction, like there's not a ton of coaching experience there, right? But what he has done for fans is we've got the peek behind the curtain every time he puts a headset on.
Yeah.
So you can watch a coach or manager manage and say, what's he doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. But then when you listen to the guys talk about it, it's endearing, right? And I think it's kind of funny because I coached sports for a long time. And I think people thought that about me. Does he actually know what he's talking about?
I think that every time I talk to you.
Right. And then I transitioned to putting on a headset and talking about sports. And people are like, oh, so you do know what you're talking about. And it's like, I'm not saying anything different than what I did. I just get an opportunity to explain what's going on in my head. And so I think that's a part where when he talks about the intricacies of pitching, like, people understand, he knows that he knows how pitchers work, despite the fact that he did in the major leagues for like 15 years, 17 years, whatever it was. And so there's just an added level of credibility because he talks about it. He does it. People like him as an announcer, I think, for the most part. And it's very much in that same realm that if Justin Morneau was hired as a manager with no managing experience, that people would be like, oh, that guy does know what he's talking about. Which I think is sometimes different than what Bert Blyleven just said the same things over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, does he really add anything of value? And Hawkins will. And I think it's kind of neat because the way that he talks, it's kind of a blend of old school baseball and new school baseball. And I think that's certainly what the collection of fans want. I think that's the best way to kind of put it. So I'm good with that hire. I do wonder, how much does a bullpen coach actually do, right? More so now than I think years ago, but he's mostly hanging out in the bullpen with people, and they're playing games, trying to pass time, throwing gum at cups and rolling balls, and doing the fun stuff that guys do in the bullpen.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to add on Hawkins. That one especially that I have not seen talked about much. You mentioned not a ton maybe of professional coaching experience. It seems clear to me that with these new hires, the Twins are leaning into something here. And Derek Shelton called it out early in his media availability, which is in Pittsburgh, they didn't have enough guys with enough MLB experience on their staff. And they've really thought about addressing that with their first two hires, the second of which we'll get to in a minute. LaTroy Hawkins pitched 21 seasons in the majors, which is almost unbelievable. Despite not having a ton of pro experience, LaTroy Hawkins is extremely seasoned as an amateur coach. He's done a ton of work with the younger Team USAs. And so I think that's also an interesting lens and angle for us as draft interested nerds / appreciators, as he has often good connections to guys Twins end up picking in the first few rounds of the draft because of Team USA experience.